the first time Queen Cerilline chose a human as her consort. Every throne in the Orion crown laughed because they believed love had made her weak. And the first time those same thrones saw what the human had been hiding behind her moon, their laughter died so completely that even their war priests forgot how to pray. He had arrived at her court with no banner, no escort, no jewels, no lineage chain glittering around his throat, only a battered gray coat, a translator ring that kept mispronouncing noble titles, and eyes the color of old storms over deep water. His name was Elias Voss. Envoy of Earth, captain by courtesy, widower by rumor, soldier by the way he stood near doors, and nobody in the Crystal Hall understood why Queen Cerilline looked at him twice. The Valorian Hive Court expected her to choose a prince from the Pearl clans, a fleet lord from the Eastern Nebula, or at least a genetic equal from one of the old star houses. Instead, she chose the quiet human who listened before speaking, smiled only when something truly amused him, and bowed to servants with the same respect he gave admirals. To the Empire, it was madness; to her ministers, it was scandal; to her enemies, it was opportunity; and to Elias Voss, it was the beginning of a lie he carried like a knife under his ribs. Cerilline had not chosen him for romance, not at first. Queens were not allowed such simple luxuries. She chose him because Earth was small but stubborn, because humans had held 3 border corridors against the insectoid, Barkle for 7 months with mining lasers and farm ships, because every intelligence file about humanity ended with some version of underestimated at severe cost. She chose him because the Orion crown was circling her throne, hungry after the death of her mother, and a human consort would insult every noble faction equally, which made him politically useful. Yet usefulness did not explain why she kept him near after the ceremonial bargain was signed. It did not explain why his silence became more comforting than court praise, why his hands, scarred and warm, never trembled when assassins were mentioned, why he watched the palace skies like a man counting exits in heaven. He learned Valorian customs faster than most foreign ambassadors, accepted venom tea without flinching, remembered the names of chamber children, and never once asked to sit on the obsidian throne beside her. When she asked why, he said, "Thrones make people forget where the floor is. Your Majesty, she should have punished the impertinence." Instead she laughed, and half the court looked as if a moon had cracked. No one saw the fleet then, because humans had hidden it in the one place arrogant civilizations never searched. Inside humility, Elias arrived during the season of glass rain, when silver storms fell upward from the oceans of Valoria Prime, and the palace towers sang under the static. Cerilline first received him in the Hall of Blooming Stone, surrounded by 600 nobles, 17 rival ambassadors, and the sacred brood banners of a dynasty that had ruled for 4,000 years. He wore no armor, which offended the military caste; no perfume, which offended the pleasure caste; no genealogical veil, which offended everyone. The herald announced him as representative of Sol, a minor defense compact with provisional observer status, and the high houses laughed softly behind their sleeves. Cerilline watched Elias hear the laughter, measure it, and decide not to care. That interested her. Most diplomats begged for dignity; Elias carried his own. She asked what Earth offered Valoria in exchange for trade passage. He answered, grain, medical foam, atmospheric processors, search and rescue crews, and a promise that human ships do not abandon allies under fire. Duke Vare of the Sapphire Line murmured that promises were the currency of weak fleets. Elias turned toward him and said, "Then your grace must be very wealthy." The hall froze. Cerilline lifted one clawed finger before her guards could move, and found herself smiling that insult should have ended him. Instead, it began the strangest courtship Valoria had ever witnessed, because Cerilline invited him to dine privately, then to observe military council, then to walk the lower gardens, where queens were never supposed to walk without a wall of attendants. The gossip became venom within days. Human spell, human parasite, human bed spy, human leash around the queen. Cerilline heard every whisper. She let them multiply, because whispers revealed mouths, and mouths revealed factions. Elias understood before she explained. He did not ask for protection, but he accepted the presence of her silent guard, a towering female warrior named Marika, who despised him on principle and followed him everywhere like an armed thundercloud. On the 7th day, someone poisoned his breakfast with spiral neurotoxin. Marika knocked the bowl away. Elias thanked her and calmly ate from the servant tray instead. When Cyrilline demanded to know why he was not afraid, Elias said, "I was afraid, Majesty. I simply had no useful place to put it." That sentence stayed with her longer than it should have. In Valorian culture, fear was shame. In human culture, apparently fear was luggage to be carried while doing the necessary thing. The marriage proposal came from Cyrilline in the old way. A blade placed between them on the council table and a question spoken before witnesses. "Stand beside me, share my dangers, bind your name to my house, and be spared no enemy that seeks my crown." The court expected Elias to refuse, to blanch, to ask Earth for permission. He looked at the blade, then at her, and said, "I have lived beside danger long enough that at least yours has better architecture." The witnesses gasped. Cyrilline declared the answer accepted before anyone explained that it might have been a joke. Their union was ceremonial first, political second, and personal only in the hours when the palace slept. He moved into the consort wing with one trunk, 12 old books, a cracked photograph of a woman and a child, and an encrypted transmitter he claimed was for Earth family messages. Cyrilline noticed the transmitter. She noticed everything, but she did not ask. Because queens survive by letting some doors remain closed until the person behind them thinks they are safe, she trusted Elias with her meals, her schedules, eventually her loneliness, but not fully with his secrets, and that was wise. Because the greatest secret in her empire had followed him through the wedding gates. The Orion crown moved first in silk, not steel. Representatives from 6 neighboring realms sent congratulations, written like condolences. Prince Keller of the Ashen Dominion gifted Cyrilline a mirror that reflected her seated alone. The implication delicate and cruel, the Pearl clan sent no gifts at all, which meant they were counting ships in council. Grand Minister Theris urged annulment before old houses revolted. Admiral Cern argued that Earth lacked the tonnage to matter. Matriarch Vela of the Temple Brood warned that the ancestral queens would not bless mixed blood in the royal chamber. Cyrilline listened to all of them, then asked Elias what he thought. He was standing near the window where glass rain crawled upward in silver strings. "I think people who mention ancestors too often are usually trying to borrow courage from the dead," he said. Vela hissed. Cyrilline ordered the comment recorded in the minutes. The court learned then that the human was not decoration, and resentment ripened from gossip into conspiracy. Elias did not behave like a consort. That made him dangerous in ways no one understood. He visited dock workers, listened to quartermaster complaints, studied palace evacuation routes, drilled servant children in fire protocols, walked the medical wing at night, and once vanished for 8 hours into the old defense archives. When Cyrilline confronted him, he said he had been reading siege records. She asked if human husbands commonly studied their brides' fortress vulnerabilities. Elias replied, "Only the romantic ones." She should have laughed. But the files he had accessed included orbital defense blind spots, emergency beacon codes, and pre-imperial tunnel maps beneath the capital. He had not stolen them. He had left the access logs visible, almost as if he wanted her to know. That unsettled her. Spies hid footprints. Elias arranged his like markers. Cyrilline began to watch him more carefully, and what she saw deepened the mystery. He sent no requests for money, no political instructions to Earth, no secret meetings with merchants, no seduction of generals. He simply mapped every weakness around her and quietly improved what he could. When he noticed that palace shield batteries required noble authorization during attack, he called the design a murder ritual with paperwork. When he learned civilian shelters were reserved by caste, his face went cold, not angry cold. He looked at Cyrilline and said, "Change this before you need it." She did not, because tradition resists warning more fiercely than insult. The first assassination attempt during the marriage feast came with music. A choir of Pearl Clan singers entered the moon garden beneath floating lamps. voices braided in harmony, ceremonial sleeves hiding pulse knives tuned to royal bone. Serenity had endured danger since childhood, but weddings create blind angles, and she saw the first blade only when it was already moving toward her throat. Elias moved faster, not elegantly, not like a duel master, but like someone who had survived rooms where elegance died first. He smashed a crystal cup into the attacker's face, dragged Serenity backward by her waist, and turned a ceremonial chair into a barrier as knives flashed through the flowers. Maraca roared, guards surged, guests screamed. The attackers had planned for Valorian reactions. Vertical leaps, venom sprays, sonic calls. They had not planned for a human throwing a dinner table into them and then using a fallen lampstand like a spear. By the time the garden was secured, 5 assassins were dead, 3 alive, and Elias was bleeding from a cut across his palm. Serenity took his hand to inspect the wound. He flexed his fingers and said, "Well, the vows did mention shared dangers." She stared at him, furious and shaken. "You could have died." He looked at her as if that had never been the central issue. "So could you?" That was the first time Queen Serenity realized the human might not be pretending. The prisoners confessed under temple venom. The Pearl clans had funded the attack, but the permission came from farther out. From Prince Keller of the Ashen Dominion, whose realm controlled the dark matter forges beyond the Western Veil. Keller had once expected to marry Serenity and absorb Valoria through blood treaty. A human consort had humiliated him. Worse, it had made Serenity unpredictable. Keller sent a public message denying involvement and privately sent another to Elias' Earthborn pet. "Leave the Queen's bed before real predators arrive?" Elias read it. Then asked Serenity if ashen metaphors were always so sweaty. She demanded seriousness. He became serious at once. What she was learning was more frightening than his jokes. "Keller is testing internal fractures," he said. "The assassination was not meant to succeed cleanly. It was meant to prove your court can be entered. Your response decides whether he raids, negotiates, or invades." Serenity narrowed her eyes. "You speak like an admiral." Elias looked back at the message. "I have read a few books." She did not believe him. That night, she ordered discreet intelligence searches on Captain Elias Voss of Earth. The official records showed relief convoy service, anti-pirate actions, diplomatic training, widower status, commendations sealed after the Varkal Corridor War, and one black section labeled Strategic Reserve Authority. Every Valorian codebreaker failed to open it. 3 nights later, Serenity found him in the observatory. Speaking to empty stars, the encrypted transmitter rested on the balcony rail, its light pulsing in rhythms too complex for family messages. He ended the transmission before she crossed the threshold. "Husband," she said, using the intimate title like a blade. "What are you hiding?" He did not lie quickly, which made her more afraid. "Old debts," he said. She stepped closer. "You married a queen. Old debts are now matters of state." Elias leaned both hands on the rail, staring down at her capital. "Your state has enemies inside the walls. Fleets gathering outside them. Shelters that will fail the poor first. Nobles who think evacuation is a privilege. And an admiral who reports what you want to hear instead of what moves on his screens." Serelyn's crest lifted in anger. "Do not evade me by describing my wounds," he turned then. And the softness she had come to rely on was still there. But behind it stood something vast, tired and heavily armed. "I am trying to keep you alive long enough to hate me properly. When you learn the answer," she slapped him, not with full force. Not enough to break bone, but enough to mark the moment. Elias accepted it without defense. Serenity left before she could ask him to stay. The war began at dawn, because arrogant men love symbolism almost as much as conquest. Keller's first strike came as a wedding tribute convoy. 30 white ships marked with ashen blessing sigils. Arriving outside Valorian orbit, with their weapons hidden beneath religious shielding, they released casket drones into the atmosphere during morning prayers. Each drone carrying nanite ash designed to blind planetary sensors and open micro-breaches in the palace shield. At the same time, Pearl Clan rebels seized 3 defense stations. Temple Brood extremists cut civilian communications, and Admiral Cern's flagship reported engine failure with suspicious convenience. Serenity reached the command chamber in armor, hair unbound, venom glands awake, and found her empire already bleeding from 6 directions. Keller appeared on the main screen, perfect in black ceremonial armor, smiling as if war were a dance he had generously begun. "Beloved Almost Bride," he said, "I come to rescue you from your human embarrassment. Send him to me in chains. Abdicate in favor of a regency council, and I will preserve your city." Serlin's court looked at her, some terrified, some hopeful for surrender. Elias stood at the edge of the chamber, no armor, gray coat buttoned, wrong. Eyes fixed on the invasion map, Serenity said, "I married the embarrassment, Prince Keller. You may address him with respect before you die." Elias glanced at her, startled, and for one breath she nearly smiled. Then the palace shields failed. Explosions walked across the eastern towers. Glass rain turned red with burning debris. Defense stations fired on loyal ships. Trader gates opened in the lower city. Ashen drop pods punched through clouds and glittering spears. The command chamber dissolved into overlapping reports. Seralini ordered counterfire. Shelter openings, royal guard deployment. But every command tangled in old protocols, noble permissions, temple overrides. In compromised relays, Elias moved to a side console. Fingers flying in human shorthand, Maraka grabbed his shoulder. "What are you doing?" he said, something romantic, and broke into the palace emergency system. Serenity saw shelters unlock across the lower city. Non-noble districts receive evacuation maps. Shield batteries switch to local command. Servant tunnels become rescue routes. He had not merely studied her fortress. He had rewritten its emergency instincts. Minister Theris screamed that he was committing treason. Elias said, "Correct, but efficiently," and kept working. Civilians began moving before the next bombardment fell. Thousands who would have died behind cast doors entered shelters that tradition had denied them for centuries. Serenity understood then why he had left visible footprints. He had been asking her to stop him before doing what she should have done herself. The Ashen Dominion expected Valoria to crack like a jewel under pressure. Instead, the lower city survived its first hour. Yet survival was not victory. Keller had brought 3 war fleets. Ashen dreadnoughts shaped like black crowns, Pearl Clan cruisers from rebel yards, mercenary flocks hired from the bone markets of Jaga. Valoria's loyal fleet was scattered. Half blinded by Nanad ash, command codes compromised. Orbital guns uncertain who to obey, Serenity stood over the tactical map and saw mathematics sharpen into doom. She had soldiers, courage, and a world full of civilians beneath fire. But not enough ships. Keller knew it. His second message came with images of burning districts. "Last chance, beloved. Send me the human, and I will let your people keep their songs." Serelia looked at Elias, for the first time since his arrival. He looked ashamed, not afraid, ashamed. She whispered, "This is about you," Keller, once the insult, answered. Elias shook his head slowly. "No, Majesty. This is about what he thinks your throne is worth. I was only the excuse." She heard the truth and hated that it did not absolve him. "What did you bring into my house, Elias?" He closed his eyes, opened them, and said, "Insurance." The human consort walked to the main command dais, placed his palm on the royal console, and spoke a phrase in Terran standard that translated poorly. "Home lantern, open the graveyard." At first nothing happened. Then the night side of Valoria's largest moon split with light. Not explosion, not volcanic fracture, but hangar doors. Thousands of kilometers of concealed panels opening beneath false crater fields. Ancient mineral shadows peeled away from hulls painted in matte black and storm gray. Ships rising from inside the moon like weapons from a myth buried under dust. Human destroyers, carrier arcs, missile barges, stealth frigates, medical fortress ships, drone foundries, railgun platforms, heavy cruisers with names written in old Earth languages. The moon itself unfolded orbital defense rings Serenity had never authorized, and from beyond the system's comet halo, more drive signatures awakened, one after another. Then hundreds, then thousands, waiting in silence, where every Valorian telescope had seen only ice. The command chamber forgot to breathe. Admiral Cern fell to his knees. Minister Theris whispered heresy. Marka aimed her weapon at Elias and did not fire because even she wanted the explanation first. Cyrilline stared at the map as human war markers flooded the sky around her world. Her consort, her politically useful, quiet, wounded human husband had hidden a war fleet inside her moon, and the fleet answered him like a sleeping dragon, hearing its true name. Keller's invasion stalled mid-burn, Ashen Admiral suddenly facing a formation that had not existed one heartbeat earlier. The largest human ship emerged last from the moon's shadow. A colossal command carrier with a scarred prow and a name burned in white across its hull. Un's Resolute Mercy. A woman's voice filled the chamber. Admiral Mara Chen, Terran Strategic Reserve, answering activation by Captain Elias Voss. Sol Reserve Fleet Dawn Mantle is combat awake. Identify defended population. Elias looked at Cyrilline, not the screen. Valoria Prime, and all civilians under Queen Cyrilline's protection, he said, friend or foe designation. Admiral Chen asked. Elias answered, anyone firing on them is foe. Chen replied, understood, beginning courtesy window. Cyrilline, still staring at him, said courtesy window. Elias winced. It is a human thing. The comm shifted to open broadcasts across the system. All hostile vessels in Valorian space. This is Admiral Chen of the United Nations Strategic Reserve. You are engaging a protected population under humanitarian shield. Ceasefire, power down weapons, and withdraw beyond the outer marker. You have 60 seconds. Keller appeared on another channel. Face pale with fury. Earth has no authority here. Chen said, 59, the Ashen Fleet fired at 47. Human doctrine answered at 46. The sky became iron. Human ships did not glitter like Valorian cruisers or move with ashen ceremonial symmetry. They moved like consequences. Railguns fired from beyond visual range. Invisible slugs crossing space at obscene velocities, breaking rebel cruisers before their shields understood impact. Missile clouds unfolded into smaller missiles, which unfolded into hunting drones, which unfolded into shaped charges that crawled along shield harmonics like wolves through reeds. Stealth frigates appeared inside enemy formations and vanished behind expanding wreckage. Carrier arcs released fighter swarms piloted by humans, drones, an allied species whose name Cyrilline did not know. The Resolute Mercy absorbed a dreadnought beam that would have cracked a Valorian station, turned slightly, and returned a kinetic broadside that split the attacker from crown to keel. The command chamber watched Ashen's strategy collapse under a style of war no old empire respected. Inelegant, redundant, adaptive, mercilessly protective. Elias stood motionless beside Cyrilline, face lit by battle maps. Each human victory cutting him somehow, instead of pleasing him. She understood then that the fleet was not hidden for conquest. It was hidden because humans had learned to put salvation and annihilation in the same locked room. Cyrilline's voice went soft. How long has this been here? Elias, he said, 17 months before I chose you. She said, before I arrived, he answered. The words struck harder than bombardment. You came to my court with a fleet already buried in my moon. Yes. Why? The old Varkal Corridor War, he said. Left fragments moving through this region, Ashen expansion models indicated they would pressure Valoria within 2 years. Earth offered quiet defense preparations to your mother. She refused public alliance, but allowed hidden staging in exchange for disaster support. When she died, the treaty became sealed under Black succession law. Only activation authority remained with the Terran officer attached to the throne. Cyrilline felt the floor tilt. My mother knew, Elias nodded. She wanted you to choose the alliance freely when the time came. She did not expect you to choose the officer too. There it was, the answer, and the wound together. Her marriage was not arranged by Earth. Not exactly, not a trap. Not innocent either, she had chosen him. But the board beneath that choice had been prepared by dead queens and living soldiers. Fury rose hot and clean. You should have told me, Elias said. Yes, no defense, no excuse. Only the word that made anger harder because it respected her right to feel it. A wounded trust is more dangerous than an enemy fleet, because it bleeds while still standing beside you. Sarelini wanted to banish him from the chamber, but Keller's forces were adapting. Pearl Clan rebels opened fire from inside civilian orbital lanes, using refugee traffic as shield clutter. Ashen boarding craft struck the outer ring of Mercy House Hospital, and Admiral Chen requested royal authorization to coordinate with Valorian ground defense. The old court looked to Sarelini, the human fleet looked to Elias, and Elias looked to her, deliberately, publicly. Surrendering the moment, she could humiliate him. Take control, reject the alliance, save pride while losing minutes. Instead, she stepped to the central dais, linked her crown seal to Admiral Chen's network, and said, "Terran Fleet, this is Queen Sarelini of Valoria. You are authorized to defend my world. You will coordinate through my command. You will protect civilian life as first priority, and you will not fire on any vessel attempting surrender unless it endangers evacuation." Chen answered without hesitation, "Accepted, Your Majesty." Elias lowered his head, not as a consort, but as a soldier acknowledging command. The gesture did not repair anything, but it gave the wound a clean edge. Sarelini used the fleet like a queen, not like a human, and that made the defense stronger. She knew the noble houses, the secret dockyards, the old Pearl Clan pride routes, the Temple Brood tunnels, the songs that signaled surrender or ambush among her people. She directed human strike teams away from sacred hatcheries and toward hidden weapons depots. Ordered Marika to lead royal guards through servant passages Elias had opened. Expose Admiral CERN's false engine failure. And force 3 wavering houses to declare loyalty by broadcasting their private evacuation. Requests to the citizens they had abandoned. Elias stayed beside her as liaison, translating human battle shorthand. Warning when Terran captains were about to do something suicidally effective, occasionally bleeding from a reopened wound because he had refused medical care after the wedding attack. Sarelini noticed, and hated herself for noticing with concern. Their voices crossed like blades and bridges, she said. "Can your destroyers disable that Pearl carrier without venting its nursery bay?" He said yes. "But it will cost time," she said. "Spend it." He relayed the order without argument a minute later. 3 human ships took unnecessary hits to preserve children born to rebels. And Sarelini looked at Elias again, understanding one more terrible thing. The fleet had been hidden for war, but its rules were built around mercy. Keller did not understand mercy, so he mistook it for hesitation. He drove his flagship, Ash Crown Eternal, through the debris field toward the Palace Arcology. Intending decapitation strike, his dreadnought carried a world-breaker lance. Illegal under 6 treaties and admired in 7 royal courts, human ships moved to intercept. But rebel mines and civilian traffic slowed them. Sarelini saw the trajectory. Saw the palace beneath the command chamber. The evacuation routes packed with children. The old brood vaults where eggs from 100 lineages trembled under shield light. Keller opened a direct channel. Hair perfect, armor cracked, smile gone rabid. "You chose an animal over a king," Sarelini replied. "I chose a man over a parasite." Keller's lance began charging. Elias grabbed the tactical rail. "Admiral Chen, intercept options," Chen answered. "None in time without firing through the city shield." Sarelini looked at the old orbital defense grid, most batteries blinded. 1 ancient moon spear still aligned but locked behind manual confirmation in the palace undercroft, a relic weapon from Dynasty Wars forbidden after it boiled a sea. It could disable Ash Crown Eternal if someone reached the undercroft and aimed it by hand. The undercroft was beneath the collapsing West Tower, flooded with nanite ash, overrun by Pearl Clan commandos. And sealed by royal blood key, Sarelini was already moving before Elias spoke. He blocked the door. "No," she said, "husband." "Move," he said, "Queen." "No." And the titles became weapons, because fear had nowhere useful to go. She did not move him. Marika did. By lifting Elias bodily and slamming him against the wall while apologizing with no sincerity, Sarelini ran with Marika and 6 guards through burning corridors. Elias following 30 seconds later, despite orders. Because humans seemed genetically unable to respect noble sacrifice when practical interference was available. The palace undercroft was a world of roots and machines beneath the royal mountain. Black stone, glowing veins, ancestral engines, older than most star maps. Pearl commandos had already breached the outer lock, killing engineers, planting charges around the Moonsphere control heart. Cerulean entered like a storm, venom blades extended. Crown seal blazing over her brow, Maraka fought beside her with brutal grace, ripping armored attackers from the stairs. Elias arrived with 2 human marines and an expression that promised future marital arguments if they survived. Together they cut through the commandos, but Keller's lance reached final charge. The control heart demanded royal blood and paired command stabilization, a safety ritual meant for monarch and chosen consort. Suralini almost laughed at the cruelty of timing. Elias placed his bleeding palm on the human-compatible patch Malik-style engineers must have added months ago. She stared. "You modified my ancestral weapon too." He said, "In my defense, your mother's engineers supervised." Cyrilini bared her teeth. Later, the weapon woke. The Moonsphere rose from beneath Valoria's largest moon. The same moon that had hidden Earth's reserve fleet, a white line of ancient force connecting Queen, Consort, and War Machine. Cyrilini aimed through instinct and blood memory. Elias stabilized through mathematics and human stubbornness. Ashcrown Eternal fired first. Its Worldbreaker lance tearing through upper atmosphere toward the palace shield, the Moonsphere fired second. It struck the lance mid-descent, bent the beam sideways, then punched into Keller's dreadnought, not destroying it, because Cyrilini chose precision over vengeance, but splitting its weapon core and leaving the ship dead in orbit. The palace shield burned blue, cracked, held. The evacuation route survived, across Valoria Prime. Citizens looked up and saw their queen's sigil burning across the smoke. Beside it, the plain white mark of Sol, not above, not below, beside. Keller's transmission returned in fragments, face bloodied, eyes disbelieving. "You could have killed me," Cyrilini answered. "I know." That frightened him more than death, because mercy from the powerful means judgment can continue. Then, the traitor in the room revealed himself. Minister Theris had always feared humans, but fear was only the first layer. He feared any future where noble blood mattered less than competence, where shelters opened to workers, where queens married beyond caste, where human engineers rewrote rituals into rescue systems. As Cerulean Elias held the Moonsphere in cooling cycle, Theris activated a hidden Pearl Clan device beneath the control heart, not aimed at the palace, not at the fleet, but at the queen herself. A crownbreaker pulse designed to sever the royal neural bond and burn out every fertile brood queen in the capital. Extinction by inheritance. Disguised as patriotism, Marika saw the device. Shouted. Elias moved. Cyrilini could not release the control heart without causing the Moonsphere to overload. So Elias did the only thing humans did better than any species she had known. He placed himself between the danger and someone else. He tore the device from its socket, but it had already triggered white fire crawling up his arms. Burning through nerve and bone, Cyrilini screamed his name. Not title, not office, name. He dropped to one knee. Holding the pulse core against his chest while his translator ring shattered, Marika cut Theris in half. The device needed a living conductor for 3 more seconds, or it would burst outward. Elias looked at Cyrilini through agony and smiled with half his mouth. 3 seconds, he whispered. The hidden fleet had shocked her. The betrayal had wounded her, but that smile broke her. He survived because Maraka shoved a royal grounding spear through the device in the floor, because Cyrilini flooded the bond with her own neural charge, because 2 human marines ignored lethal exposure warnings and dragged him out of the pulse radius, because sometimes the universe allows courage to be punished without being ended. Elias woke 6 hours later in a medical cocoon aboard Resolute Mercy. Skin silvered by graft mesh, left arm gone below the elbow, chest marked by branching burns that no regenerator could fully erase. Cyrilini sat beside him, wearing battle armor and dried blood, no crown. No attendants except Marika, asleep in a chair with her weapon across her knees. Elias opened one eye and said, I am beginning to suspect your court dislikes me. Seralini did not laugh. She took his remaining hand. You hid a fleet in my moon. He closed his eye again. Yes. You let me marry you without telling me? Yes. You rewrote my palace, unlocked my shelters, modified my ancestral weapon, and conspired with my dead mother. Technically, he rasped, your mother conspired with me. Seraline leaned close enough for him to see the storm in her face. I should exile you, he said. I know. I should hate you. He whispered, you may yet. She pressed his hand against her brow. An intimate Valorian gesture no human camera had ever recorded. Not today. Outside the medical bay, the battle ended piece by piece. Keller's fleet surrendered after Admiral Chen demonstrated what humans called a non-lethal warning shot by removing the engines from 3 dreadnoughts at once. Pearl Clan cruisers lowered banners when Seralini broadcast Theris's treason and opened amnesty for crews who protected civilians. Admiral Cern was arrested by his own bridge officers after trying to flee, and the Bone Market mercenaries discovered that human drone swarms could pursue contract violations into hyperspace. By nightfall, Valoria Prime still burned in districts. But its shelters overflowed with people who should have been dead under old law. Its orbital lanes filled with human medical arcs and Valorian rescue barges working side by side. Its queen's consort lay broken but alive, and its moon once just a silver ornament of royal poetry, bristled with Terran warships like a crown of dark teeth. Seralini walked through the lower city at dawn, against every security recommendation, and saw workers kneel not in fear, but relief. Children touched the soul patches on human armor. Old priests stared at open shelters in theological distress. Maraka carried a sleeping human medic over one shoulder after the woman collapsed from exhaustion, muttering that Earth people were badly designed and impossible to discourage. The city had not merely survived an invasion, it had seen the shape of its own lies, and survival had made those lies harder to rebuild. The emergency council convened in the cracked hall of blooming stone, beneath a ceiling patched by human temporary foam and Valorian living crystal. The nobles arrived furious, frightened, grateful, and humiliated, which made them dangerous in all directions. Serelin sat alone on the obsidian throne because Elias was still in recovery, but his empty consort chair remained beside her. Not removed, not hidden, Admiral Chen appeared by Hala at her right. Keller appeared in chains by Hala from a disabled Ashen brig, and every major house of the Orion Crown watched through secure channels. Duke Vaer demanded an accounting of foreign weapons hidden on sacred Valorian soil. Matriarch Vela demanded annulment of a union built on concealment. Surviving Pearl Lords demanded mercy while pretending not to have funded murder. Sorelli let them speak until their outrage began repeating itself. Then she rose. The hall quieted because queens had many voices. And this was the one that made armies remember they had knees. You ask what the human hid, she said. He hid a fleet. Yes. With my mother's sanction, under Black Treaty law, he hid emergency codes in our palace. He hid evacuation routes and servant tunnels. He hid medicine in cargo bays, soldiers in the dark, and mercy inside systems built to deny it. Her crest rose. And what did you hide, Vaer? Your private ships, while the lower city burned? What did you hide, Vela? Temple shelters behind purity locks. What did you hide, Pearl Lords? Assassination contracts beneath wedding songs. The hall shook with protests. She raised one hand. Silence fell like a blade. The difference is simple. The human hid power to save us. You hid privilege to survive us. No speech had ever wounded the old houses so cleanly. Serelini declared the hidden treaty public, recognized the Terran Reserve Fleet as lawful allied defenders until the Ashen threat ended, dissolved caste restrictions on emergency systems, opened military command exams to non-noble citizens, and ordered a full investigation into every house that had delayed shelter access during bombardment. Vela warned that tradition would fracture. Serelin answered, let it fracture where it has become a cage. Duke Vaer threatened succession challenge. Marika stepped forward and asked whether he preferred the old trial by venom, blade, or public audit. He chose silence. Admiral Chen formally offered Earth reconstruction support without territorial demand, which confused the nobles more than any threat. Cyrilini accepted, then turned to Keller's image. Prince of Ash, you invaded my world, targeted civilians, armed traitors, and tried to steal a throne you were never worthy to polish. Under old law, I would execute you. Under the law I am writing now. You will live to see your crimes documented, your victims named, and your dominion stripped of the weapons it used to terrorize its neighbors. Keller spat. That human softness had infected her. Cyrilini smiled. Not softness, memory, for 7 weeks. Valoria rebuilt under the shadow of the Hidden Fleet, and Sorelli learned that alliances are less glorious in practice than in songs. There are arguments about supply manifests, incompatible bolts, medical ethics, funeral rites, air filtration, jurisdiction, and who gets blamed when exhausted engineers insult sacred architecture. Human soldiers were too informal Valorian officers to ceremonial. Earth doctors ignored noble priority until threatened, then ignored it more aggressively. Valorian priests tried to bless reactor foam and were recruited into morale teams. Maraka and Admiral Chen developed mutual respect through shouting. Elias, recovering slowly, became the bridge everyone wanted and nobody fully trusted. He walked with a prosthetic arm of matte black carbon. Weaker than before, but somehow more present, Seralini visited him each night. Sometimes to discuss policy, sometimes to argue, sometimes to sit in silence because anger and love had become tangled roots in the same soil. He never asked forgiveness, which made it easier to consider giving one evening. Beneath a temporary hospital canopy, she asked if he had married her because of the treaty. Elias looked at the rows of sleeping wounded before answering. I accepted because of the treaty, he said. I stayed because of you. She hated how much she needed that distinction, and how much it still hurt. Years later, the Moonhangers no longer hid their teeth. Their doors remained open under treaty seals. Their warships paired with hospital arcs and rescue carriers, and cadets from 20 species learned the lesson Valoria had paid for in fire. Cyrilini never forgot the shock of seeing a human fleet rise from her moon. And Elias never pretended secrecy had been harmless. Their marriage survived because both of them made power answerable. His fleet to her law, her throne to the people it had failed. On the invasion anniversary, they stood above the old launch craters while children repeated the favorite legend. The alien queen chose a human consort, then discovered he had hidden a war fleet. Cyrilini smiled at the simplified version, because legends always polish away the blood, yet the truth was stronger. She had chosen a man she thought was a useful insult to her enemies. He had hidden a fleet because the dark was coming, and when war arrived, that hidden power did not conquer her world. It knelt to defend it from that day onward. Every tyrant in the Orion crown learned the same lesson: beware the quiet human beside the throne. Because if he loves the queen, if he loves her people, and if he has been smiling too patiently, he may not be alone.